Ghosts have somehow moved into my day.
Hello everyone, Pamela Zero here. Welcome to Duck Duck Goose, a podcast about the Visitor series. This episode includes chapters 13 and 14 of the book Osei. Thanks for coming along on Osei's journey. Chapter 13, Fran, Dome 1, Thrid. Fran closed her eyes as dirt rained down on the back of her neck. She had pulled her skin suit up over her head, but old reflexes still took over. Being the last one in line through the tunnel meant that most of the dirt they were unable to pack down got pushed back along the top of the tunnel. The three of them were wearing headlamps that gave a bit of light. Nir was in the lead so he could widen the tunnel where needed. Grissle looked large, but their fur compressed, and they were quite wiry under all their fluff. The three of them had been moving steadily downward for almost an hour now, and Fran marveled at how quickly Nir could dig. She kept up, but it was an effort, and the small pack she had slung in front of her stomach kept bumping against her legs. "I apologize for the Urlu," said Nir, his voice muffled as he ducked his head to avoid a root. "What is Urlu?" asked Fran. "It is the rain of dirt underground." "Urlu," said Duck softly to herself. "I appreciate you making the tunnel wide enough for my shoulders to fit through," replied Fran. "I told him that you couldn't leave your shoulders behind," noted Duck, as she glanced back at Fran. "We have a coral up ahead," said Nir. "Good, we can have a snack." Duck picked up her pace a bit. Crawling at a downward angle was tiring, but they had brought food and water, and the thought of a bit of a break gave them all a burst of energy. "What's a coral?" asked Fran. "It's a spot that's dug out a bit so we can sit and rest." They reached the coral a few minutes later, and Nir spent a few minutes hollowing it out so Fran could sit up comfortably. They opened up their small packs and pulled out a small feast. Duck had brought some oyster berries and a thin vegetable that was sour and crunchy. Fran had brought water, some dried meat, and cookies. Nir had brought hard bread and a small container of something that looked like sand but tasted like cheese. The three set to eating. Fran noted that part of the wall was made up of small stones that seemed to hold together without any visible adhesive. There were gaps between the stones. "How are the stones staying in place?" Nir pried a small rock out of the floor of the coral and spit on it. He pressed it against a stone in the wall, and it stayed. "Our saliva can be a glue, or it can be an acid and dissolve rock, though that is slow. It is easier to move a stone than dissolve it." "Why do you make the wall out of stones?" "The stones are where the air is coming from. There is a river of stones that follows this tunnel. Sometimes Duck helps me find stones. I place them as I dig. This stone river goes up to the topsoil, and it comes down out on the side of a hill." "We're not supposed to move the blue and yellow flowers," said Duck. Nir nodded. "The blue and yellow flowers are planted wherever a stone river's entrance is placed. We keep them there so no one will destroy this stone river and harm those in the tunnel." Fran looked at the stone wall intently. There was a lot about Grissle that she didn't know. The three of them sat for a bit longer and then packed up their food and water. There was still another half hour of crawling to go before they would reach Nir's mysterious room. Fran slowed down as the tunnel widened and moved between Duck and Nir. The three of them crawled forward as the floor leveled out. The dirt under Fran's hands felt cold. Then she felt metal under her fingers. Nir held up one paw. "Stop here. This is the metal tunnel," said Nir, peering down into a hole in the floor. Fran and Duck inched closer to see. They shone their headlamps into a much larger tunnel with corrugated walls. Duck wrinkled her nose. "It smells dusty." Nir swung his feet into the hole and then jumped down. Fran followed. There was enough room for her to stand. She held her arms up and helped Duck down. The tunnel stretched in both directions, dark and silent. The glow of their headlamps provided only enough light for them to see a few meters. "This way," said Nir. "How do you know which way to go?" asked Duck. "I went both ways before." That way leads to a locked door. This way leads to a big room, replied Near. Eventually, the metal tunnel ended in a little room with a set of dusty doors in the far wall. Their headlamps played across a small metal plate to the right of the doors. There was a curved line with a dot at the top etched on it. Anyone know what that symbol means? Asked Fran. She let her skin suit adjust so her head and hands were uncovered. Nope. Fran took a quick picture of the plate with her comm unit. How did the doors open? Near reached out and pushed one of the doors. It swung inwards without resistance. Beyond the threshold was a deep blackness. Near let his headlamp shine into the darkness, showing glimpses of intricate machinery. Duck took a torchlight out of her pack and turned it on. She shone it into the room, revealing a large space with orderly rows of machines. Fran took out a beacon and dropped it by the door, just in case. She pulled out a scanner and tested the air just inside the door. Okay, we're going in, but there are a few cautionary just-in-case rules that we all need to agree to. Near and Duck nodded. 1, we stick together. 2, we say something immediately if we feel weird or get tired or want to eat. 3, if I say we need to leave, we go with no arguments. Any other rules we need? Yes. 4, we take a lot of pictures because no one is going to believe us. Duck already had her own comm unit out, ready to document what they had found. 5, if we find floors above, we go up and see if we can geolocate where we are so we can make a shorter tunnel, said Near. 6, funny smells are important. He was shifting his weight from one foot to the other, and his claws were slightly extended. You okay, Near? Fran looked at him and raised an eyebrow. I am excited about sharing this place and discovering more. I am happy that I have friends who have come with me to learn new things. I am prepared to dig. Duck nodded. I will say something if I smell anything weird. Can we go in? It's scarier standing in front of the darkness than going into the darkness. Fran got out her torchlight and went first, prodding the dusty floor with one toe before stepping in. The machines were all different, with rows of dials and buttons marching across their surfaces. There were dozens of them, towering over the 3 explorers. Fran shone her light onto the walls, solid and windowless. The ceiling was far overhead, with a grid of what seemed to be lights hanging down from it. Near, whose vision in the dim light was much better, squinted and walked over to a panel of dials on the right wall. Auntie Fran, look at these. Interesting. Fran kept her tone even and her face impassive. She had seen dials like these before, when she had been pulled forward into the laboratory at Burston. Duck was silent. Fran turned and shone her torchlight near Duck, letting the spilled light illuminate the little girl. Duck's face was rigid. Fran spoke softly. Near? I think this building is a Thridian building. These dials look like something we saw a lot of when we first got pulled through from the past. Near stepped back from the dials. Should we go? Is this a bad place? Duck stepped forward. We don't know if this is a bad place or not. It reminds me of a bad place. She reached up and turned one of the dials. I know these symbols. This is the dial for light. There was a humming sound, and the lights overhead sputtered on. The 3 of them looked around. The walls were dull gray, with panels inserted here and there. The rows of equipment looked old and decrepit in the light, and a few of the taller pieces of machinery seemed to have collapsed. A thick layer of dust covered the floor. There were 2 sets of doors, one they had come in through and one on the opposite wall. All right then, Duck. Are you okay going further, or are we done for today? Fran took Duck's hand. I want to go further. I want to see if they're here. Duck gripped Fran's hand tightly. Near? Fran turned to the Grissle. I would like to explore more, said Near. So would I, said Fran. However, we need to make sure we're ready for whatever we run into here. Near, have you spent any time in Phase? Fran asked. No. I would like to, though. I think my fur will keep me warm. Fran half smiled. I would like to take you into phase for just a moment, if that's okay with you, just to see how you do with it. If we get into trouble, I can pull us into phase. Is it safe? Near's voice was hesitant. First times are safe with Auntie Fran because she always knows where and when she is. Duck nodded and swung her free hand. After you phase for the first time, you'll know how you do in phase, and then you can practice how deep you can go. Near carefully sheathed his claws and held out his huge paw. Fran took it, squeezed Duck's hand, and brought the three of them into the first level of phase. Both she and Duck kept their gazes on Near, who shut his eyes instinctively as the freezing cold of phase hit. He opened them slowly, looking around. A smile came to his face, and he gave a thumbs up with his free hand. Fran brought them out of phase, keeping a tight hold on both. How do you feel? I am slightly chilly, answered Near. My eyes feel dry. That was exciting. You handled phase well. Some beings get ill or too cold, or their minds cannot reconcile the shift in time. Fran nodded. With a bit of training, I think you could handle phase easily. Duck smiled for the first time since entering the building. Near, you are an excellent digger and a natural at being in phase. You are very capable. Good job. Near nodded and extended his claws. I am prepared to go further. They took pictures of the room and machinery, then worked their way back to the interior set of doors. Duck and Near stood back as Fran put her ear to the door, listening carefully. After a silent moment, she pushed on one of the doors, and it swung open. A lit hallway stretched into the distance. Doors dotted both walls of the corridor. Duck and Near walked forward, and the three of them entered the hall. The floor had a lot less dust on it, but the air smelled mustier. Fran reached the first door on the right and pushed it. It stayed closed. She looked around for a handle or knob, but there was only the smooth surface of the door. A beep came from Fran's comm unit. Okay, said Fran. We are at our halfway point as far as time goes. We need to start back. Fran looked down the corridor. This place is pretty big. I think we might need some help exploring. Duck looked at Near. Near, what do you think? This is your secret. Near's ears went forward. I am glad to have this adventure with you both. I would like to have more people come and help us explore. He paused. I am surprised, Auntie Fran, that you did not spill the beans about this to the other adults. I thought you would. I was wrong. He gave a small nod of his head. Auntie Fran and I have had great and secret adventures before. We don't tell unless we have to. Duck nodded at Fran. We are very capable. The adults that I know would never have let us come down here, even with them, to explore, explained Near. Fran nodded. Near, I can phase in the blink of an eye, and there's not much that can harm me or catch me off guard. As far as Duck is concerned, she's got a lot of tricks up her sleeve. You know how to survive underground. I figured we could keep each other safe. The three of them turned and walked back the way they had come. When they reached the first room, Duck paused by the panel of dials on the wall. Should we leave the lights on? Near? Asked Fran. No. Turn them off in case they are powered by a finite source. They switched on their headlamps and torches again, and Duck shut off the lights. They walked out into the tunnel entrance area, and Fran sighed as she covered her head and hands with her skin suit again. Don't worry, Auntie Fran. It's easier crawling uphill. Duck was already crouched behind Near, heading into the tunnel. Fran got on her hands and knees and followed. Chapter 14. Yulish, the Temple, Hutlam. Yulish watched Selris roll the second guard's body into the pool of black mold. She let her gaze drift down to the stones piled at the base of the source. Buck said he had put the switch under a greenish stone on the right side of the source, and there were no greenish stones in sight. She blinked her eyes, trying to focus. She was exhausted after staying up all night, re-rehearsing her part of the con just in case. Yulish stretched and walked around the source casually, keeping an eye on Selrus when she could. "Patience, Yulish," said Selrus. "You are right. It's important that there be no trace." "I know, my love. I just feel so antsy, so close to the source." Her eyes scanned the stones, looking for anything even remotely green. She finally saw a rock, nearly buried by the others, that had a slightly green tinge to it. Yulish got close to it and then stretched, raising her hands high over her head and then bending forward gracefully to touch her toes. She glanced over at the green rock and saw the switch tucked just under it. Relief coursed through her. She straightened up and purred. "Selrus, we should start. It's chilly in here, and there's something about the source that gets me all tingly." Yulish pouted and walked to the side of the stone where the scaffolding was. She put her hands on the first set of cross braces, and then gasped when Selrus came up quickly behind her and grabbed her hands. "Careful," admonished Selrus. "The source is not something you just climb up onto. We need to pray first, and then rise to the top with pure intent." Yulish took a deep breath. The next step in her plan was to get Selrus to the top of the rock. Prayers and good intentions meant delays, and delays increased the risk of failure. Yulish whirled around and glared at Selrus. "Do you think I don't know how to do this? Do you think I have not dreamed of this every night since I've come through? Do you think I'm going to take one moment more than I need to? The prophecy must be fulfilled. Are you the one now who will stand in my way? Are you?" Selrus stared at Yulish, shocked. She put her hands on her hips. "If you must pray, pray on the way up. If you truly want to be a consort, I suggest you scatter your good intentions while climbing." Yulish turned back to the scaffolding and climbed carefully up to the top. Selrus followed close behind, muttering to himself. Yulish wasn't sure if his words were a prayer or a curse. When they got to the top of the scaffolding, they stood even with the top of the source. Yulish grinned. There was plenty of room for both of them to lie down. She walked onto the source, then stopped and turned, her arms outstretched. "Come, consort, let us fulfill the prophecy." Selrus stumbled onto the source, not as dazed as Yulish hoped he would be, but enough for her plan to work. She took his hands and kneeled, pulling him with her. "Selrus, darling, are you ready?" Selrus nodded. He was shaking. Yulish paused for a moment. Selrus had been ridiculously easy to fool so far, but he was no idiot. If he was trembling, the source was either somehow dangerous, or it was so holy that being on top of it frightened him. Yulish considered abandoning the plan, but decided to keep going. She was just overtired. She moved her hand behind her back, slipping a small needle out of the waistband of her skirt, and smiling at Selrus. He took a deep breath and moved closer. Yulish embraced him, then plunged the tiny needle into the back of his neck. Selrus collapsed on top of her. She wiggled her way out from under him and methodically removed his clothing, dropping each piece over the side of the source. He'd be out for about 3 minutes. She needed to work quickly. Yulish climbed back down the scaffolding and flipped the switch by the green rock. A soft blue glow radiated up through the source, courtesy of a light buried at the base yesterday by Buck. The light was a basic model sold by the service around the galaxy and guaranteed to last for at least 5 cycles. Yulish spent a precious moment delighting in the irony of fooling the service with their own technology. Gathering the discarded clothing, she gleefully shoved it into one of the black pools. She climbed back up to the top of the source and took off her dress, tossing it over the side of the source. Yulish checked to make sure her fake skin suit, which was supposedly condensed and worn wrapped as a thick blue ribbon around her neck, was in place. A thrill passed through her as she imagined the power, the accolades, the attention she'd get as the first. She lay down next to Selrus and closed her eyes, exhausted. The stone underneath her was cold. Yulish woke to shouts and someone putting their hand over her mouth. She opened her eyes wide, ready to bite, and saw Selrus crouched above her. The shouts were coming from below. "The source! The source is glowing! The source! The source!" Yulish tried to sit up, but Selrus held her down, his face contorted with fear. Yulish bit his hand, and he snatched it away from her mouth, aghast. Yulish called out loudly before Selrus could muzzle her again. "The source has been awoken! The prophecy has been fulfilled!" She got to her feet, a bit groggy. How could she have fallen asleep? She stood tall on the stone, naked, and called out to the guards below. "Bring your fellow lasts! Bring food and wine and all those worthy to celebrate the source! The source has woken!" 2 guards stood below. They had reported for their usual guard shift and found only the softly glowing source. They gazed up at Yulish, eyes wide, and then ran off across the cave out the door. Yulish looked puzzled. "No signal," gasped Selrus. "There's no comm signal down here. They ran to spread the word." He looked pale. "Consort, are you all right?" Yulish pretended to be genuinely concerned. "You're the first. You're really the first. That means I am the consort." "Of course you are. Don't you remember? We came up here to the top of the stone, and you spoke those beautiful words, and then we lay together in rapture, and then the source started glowing. It was amazing." Yulish paused a moment to see if her words had sunk in, then sighed heavily and pulled Selrus up to his feet. Selrus blinked his eyes a few times and then looked down at himself. Where are my clothes? You tore them off in the midst of our passion. I think they're somewhere down there." Selrus moved towards the scaffolding, but Yulish held his arm tightly and stood in place. The guards returned with several other lasts. Yulish spread her arms wide and waited until they got closer. "The source has awoken," she announced. "The prophecy has been fulfilled. I am your first. This is my consort." She bowed low, pulling Selrus with her. The quick glimpse she had of the small group below showed upturned faces and mouths agape. A steady stream of people was coming into the cave. They gasped in amazement as they saw the newly glowing source bounce off the cave walls. "Yulish," stammered Selrus. First, we need clothes." "Why, my love? We have nothing to hide. We are the first in the consort. Everything we are is in service to the source." Yulish waved her arms around in what she hoped were gracious arcs and smiled at the people below. "My beloved people, would you bring us nourishment? Our labors have been mighty. Would you bring us vestments? For the power of the prophecy has torn our clothing asunder." Yulish turned to Selrus and raised an eyebrow. "Better?" He nodded slowly and half raised one hand as the crowd cheered. Last Kester, the Temple, Hutlam. Last Kester heard screaming through the open balcony doors in his quarters. He opened one eye and squinted at Srilla, the medic tending to his ulcers. "Srilla, are you hearing screams?" Srilla's gaze stayed on the monitor hovering over Kester's prone body. The wreath of ear-like appendages that circled her head rippled as she watched Kester's stats roll across the monitor screen. "Yes, Last Kester. However, investigation will need to wait, as the tube is quite deep and removing it now means leaving your treatment incomplete." Kester was flat on his back on a medbed, floating just high enough for Srilla to insert a small tube into his abdomen and spray his ulcers with a soothing gel. His gold robe was lifted up to his chest, his undergarments brilliant white against the orange of the medbed sheets. "Get that thing out of me!" fumed Kester. The screams evolved into cheers and shouts echoing outside the door that led to his balcony in the dome. Kester felt the tube tug deep within him and then leave his abdomen. "Very well, Last Kester. The tube is removed. However, you'll need to reschedule your treatment if you wish to minimize future pain." Srilla blinked as Kester jumped off the table and bolted out of the room. He stopped on the balcony outside his door, staring in confusion at the people celebrating below. A small bloom of blood appeared on his robe, vivid purple against the gold silk. He strained to hear individual words, but was too high up to hear the voices clearly. Cursing, he dashed back into his room to find his calm. Snatching it up, he saw a dozen messages, one from the head last. Kester stabbed buttons until head last Poin's voice filled the air. Last Kester, rejoice, the source has awakened. It is renewed. A circle meeting is called immediately in the cavern. Our salvation is at hand. Kester's knees gave way and he sank to the ground. The source was renewed. He felt old prayers from childhood rise to his lips. O great Lord, for all you allow we are grateful, for all you deny we are chastened, for all you promise we are hopeful, for all you remove we are accepting. He squeezed his eyes shut and bent to place his forehead on the floor. His body tensed, braced for the heavy, familiar feeling of the priest's boots on his back. Last Kester? Cyrilla's voice poured into his ears. He sat up and then climbed to his feet with effort. You can go, medic. His voice shook. Last Kester, you are bleeding. Your tube port must have torn. Give me a moment to fix it, said Cyrilla. Get out, yelled Kester. The source has woken. You have no place in this moment. He sank into a chair, his breath heavy. Cyrilla tilted her head and looked at Kester's face. She spoke softly. At least let me fix the port. If you don't, you will continue bleeding, and your robes will be stained at this auspicious moment. Kester glared at her, then nodded. Cyrilla helped him remove the bloodied robe and worked quickly, sealing the tear at the edge of his port with synth skin. You will need to avoid quick movements for the next few hours, she said. Kester's face was pale. My robes are in the bedroom closet. Get me a new one. Her crown rippling, Cyrilla frowned, but fetched the robe. Surely your offer may be of better use to you now than a medic, at least to assist you with items such as robes. Kester held his arms up for the robe, and Cyrilla dropped it over his head. There was no need to tell her why there was no offer serving him, why no one but himself made his food unless he got it from the cafeteria, where everyone ate the same thing. Offered could be bought. Offered could be spies or assassins. Now go, he said, staring past her. The gods may not be a part of the service, but they were a part of miracles, and the source renewed was a miracle indeed. Thank you for listening to Ose, Book 2 of the Visitor series. Ose was written by Pamela Zero. This podcast was recorded and edited by Pamela Zero. The song Ghosts was written, sung, and produced by Pamela Zero. Background music is called Insight, and it's by Megan Wofford. Ose is available in paperback on Amazon. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and visit thevisitorseries.com for more info. Thanks, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.